I never should have kept a OUJIA board in my house. Terrifying paranormal events unfolded. I never should have opened that door. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening, and I was just getting ready to settle down with a book. The familiar soft glow of my lamp cast warm shadows in the corners of my room, where old memories stirred like ghosts. But then, I heard it. A faint whisper, a breath of sound that curled around me like a chilling fog, a reminder that something was amiss. My hands trembled as I set down the book, the leather cover cool against my skin. I glanced around my dimly lit room. The shadows looked thicker tonight, more menacing. In the corner, the OUJIA board lay covered in a dust cloth, its dark wood and gilt letters beckoning like forbidden treasure. I had bought it out of curiosity, a thrill-seeker's impulse to touch the unknown. But now, it felt like it held the weight of 1,000 secrets. The air turned cold, as if I had opened a window to the void. A swell of dread kicked inside my chest, the kind of fear that makes the hair on your neck stand tall. Footsteps echoed softly from the hallway, but I was home alone. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, a relentless drum calling me to action. Something was in the house, something that shouldn't be here. I wanted to run. Instead, I walked towards the board, mesmerized and terrified. I reached out, my fingers brushing the surface, and suddenly, the lights flickered, and an unearthly shiver danced along my spine. The whispers grew louder, words spilling from unseen lips. They brushed against my skin, soft and sinister. Panic surged, twisting up my throat. What had I awakened? An object on my desk rattled. The framed photograph of me and my friends tilted, ready to tumble. My breath quickened. I wanted to scream, to break free from this nightmare, but I was rooted to the spot. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, dark figures swaying in the flickering light. I turned slowly, the chill creeping up my back, and there it was, a figure, dark and featureless, lurking just beyond the threshold of my doorway. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart raced. I felt dizzy with dread. How could this be happening? I clutched the edge of the desk, knuckles white, fighting the urge to flee. But my gaze was drawn back to the board. The planchette had moved even though I hadn't touched it. It pointed sharply to goodbye. What did it mean? With a sudden crash, the door slammed shut behind me, rattling the entire house. I jumped back, fear exploding in my chest. I was not alone after all. Something was reaching for me, clawing its way out of the darkness. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shadows thickened, coiling around my legs like serpents as I stumbled backward, my breath hitching in my throat. The door, solid and imposing, felt more like a prison than an exit. I could feel its presence that slithered through the air, heavy and suffocating, filling the room with an electric tension. My skin prickled as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, frantic and clamoring for attention. Leave now, stay. The voices swirled around me, an unholy chorus urging me to make a choice. I pressed my back against the cold wall, thoughts racing. What had I done? What had I unleashed when I dared to disturb the board? I could almost hear the gleeful cackles of unseen entities, feeding off my fear, relishing my helplessness. I glanced at the Ouija board again, the planchette continuing its dreadful dance, darting between letters. My blood ran cold as it traced familiar names, friends who had come and gone, their faces flashing before me, smiling, laughing, oblivious to the horror now consuming me. What did it want? To claim them? To claim me, Jessica. A whisper, sharp as glass, slashed through my thoughts, and I froze. A name that I hadn't uttered in months, yet one that felt so present, so insistent. She had been my anchor, together we had laughed, we had shared secrets and fears. I had sworn never to speak of her after that night, the night she vanished without a trace, leaving only questions and shattered friendships in her wake. Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath misting in front of me, swirling in unnatural patterns. Jessica! My voice cracked as I called her name into the suffocating silence. Staring at the board, I could barely comprehend the implications. This was not merely some silly game, this was a summoning, a mingling with forces I couldn't begin to grasp. A violent crash echoed from the hallway, a sound like furniture being overturned. My heart raced as I darted to the door, grasping the knob, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as though something was holding it shut from the other side. The whispers intensified in desperation, demanding attention, each word more urgent than the last. Jessica, please. The names haunted me, pooling around me like fog, and just before I could scream, the lights went out, enveloping me in darkness so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, to break the spell of the board that still shimmered in my mind's eye. I could feel it thin, a faint pull, a tether that wrapped around my heart, calling me back to the board. I fell to my knees, driven by a compulsion I couldn't resist. As I crawled closer, the planchette jerked violently, spelling out a single word I would never have imagined: help. The air crackled, and I could feel the shadows shift, growing restless. They seemed to pulse with a life of their own, coiling tighter, forming a barrier. A flicker of light burst to life against the far wall before extinguishing as quickly as it appeared. My pulse quickened. There was something, the rear figure, hazy and indistinct, flitting along the edges of the darkness. Jessica. The word escaped my lips in a whisper as the shadows shrank back like a receding tide, leaving behind a dreadful stillness. I strained to listen, heart pounding in my ears. The silence hung heavy, but then, a voice emerged from the depths of night, soft and fragile. Help me please. Barely holding on to sanity, I crawled closer to the Ouija board, pulse racing. Another flicker, this time illuminating a glimpse of something, a face, hollow eyes staring into the very depths of my soul. I could feel it staring back, an icy grip locking around my heart, squeezing tighter. Then it spoke again, louder, demanding, "I'm coming." No longer does escape seem possible. The shadows laughed, a chorus of whimsy that echoed within the walls, as terror unfurled its claws deep into my being. I gasped as a harsh wind swept through the room, and the door broke free from its invisible restraint, swinging open with maddening force, revealing a corridor engulfed in darkness. I didn't want to, but I was drawn forward, propelled by fear and a desire for answers. But as I stepped over the threshold, the lights flickered back on, revealing the hallway lined with flickering shadows, each one shaped like a face I once knew, their mouths forming the word missing from my lips: run. The corridor stretched out before me, dark and enticing, but something lurking in the shadows pulled harder than my urge to flee. A figure, a familiar outline that I longed to recognize, took form at the far end. Jessica? I called, voice trembling. But the answer that came was not one I was prepared for. The response was a low, mocking chuckle that rippled through the air, chilling me to the bone. The figure flickered, as if the light couldn't quite hold its form, wavering between the familiar and the grotesque. It's not Jessica, I thought, a surge of panic washing over me. My mind raced through memories, desperate to find her, to piece together the puzzle that had unraveled my life. But whatever stood before me felt so wrong. It was a marionette dancing on threads too dark to comprehend. Jessica. I screamed again, but the voice that echoed back belonged to the shapeless figure. It was both hauntingly sweet and unbearably twisted. You shouldn't have called me, it crooned, and with each word, a whirlwind of icy air rushed past me, almost shoving me back into the suffocating darkness of the room I had just escaped. You don't know the cost of your actions. The shadows danced wildly along the walls, whispering and teasing, as if sharing secrets among themselves that I could not grasp. I felt the walls squeezing in around me, drawing closer like a hungry beast ready to swallow its prey whole. You wanted help? The figure continued, slithering closer, its form shifting like smoke, morphing into a silhouette of something unmistakably human, yet undeniably monstrous. I can help you. Just as its shadowed hand reached out toward me, a violent scream tore through the corridor, reverberating off the walls, each echo a reminder of the friends I had lost, the void Jessica's absence had carved in my heart. I shivered as their faces swirled in the darkness around me, each mouth moving in unison, their eyes pleading, then narrowing into something sinister. Don't listen to it. They cried out, but how could I? The pull of the figure before me was undeniable, feeding on my desperation. It promised salvation from my constant nightmares, clarity in a world gone dark. But at what cost? I took a step back, the weight of dread dragging me down. "I don't want to help," I yelled, but the words sounded hollow, drowning in the cacophony of disbelief. It was too late for me, or the board had ensured that. Their fate was intertwined with mine now. The figure's smile widened, its eyes glowing like embers. "Help comes at a price, my dear," it hissed, and the shadows closed in around us, wrapping tighter and tighter as I staggered back, feeling the splintering walls pushing against my shoulders, and just when I thought I would be crushed by the unseen forces colliding within the narrow space, the lights flickered violently and surged with a blinding brightness, illuminating the figure fully, a face once dear to my heart, twisted and warped by the darkness, those hollow eyes reflecting nothing but despair. "Jessica!" I cried, in disbelief and sorrow. "No." But she didn't respond in words. Instead, she lifted her hand, revealing something glistening between her fingers, a shard of glass, red-stained at the edges. "You have to decide," she urged. "They need a vessel." The walls whispered feverishly, the sounds mixing with the rasp of my heartbeat, rising to a crescendo of dread. I could hear my friends, their voices merging into a high-pitched wail, pleading for release, for revenge, for me to free them from the shackles of this hell. "Join us." They cried in unison, their faces contorted in agony, materializing from the shadows surrounding me. Become one with the darkness, the air thickened with their sorrow and rage, and I turned back to the figure Jessica, or whatever she had become, her eyes reflecting a sadness deeper than the abyss. "You have to make a choice," she repeated, her voice pained yet enticing. "You can save me." How had this been my life's culmination? A choice between darkness and despair, between losing everything I loved or damning my soul to this wretched fate. "Time's running out," the figure hissed, growing impatient, shadows swirling faster around us, distorting reality itself. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, and before I could respond, her grip on that shard tightened. "I'm coming," she whispered again, sending chilling tremors coursing through my body. In a split second, decision-driven by desperation, I lunged toward Jessica, reaching out for her, but just then, the lights flickered once more, and she was gone, leaving behind only the swirling mass of shadows, the board still aglow, revealing a new message spelling out one final word. "Now." And then everything went black. Darkness enveloped me like a shroud, smothering the remnants of my breath as I struggled to comprehend the abrupt loss. I could feel the heaviness in the air around me, thick as molasses. It smelled of decay and despair, the aftertaste of what once was. For a brief moment, there was silence, an oppressive stillness that pressed against my eardrums like a vice. Then, in the void, something stirred, a low whisper traveling along the ground, beckoning me with sinister intent. Now it sang, each syllable lingering like a crumbling ghost rising from the ashes of my fading sanity. I felt its essence crawling over my skin, spreading a chilling awareness within the marrow of my bones, amplifying my fear. The shadows writhed, morphing into grotesque figures that kept dancing at the edges of my vision. Each time I tried to focus, they slipped away, taunting me, mocking my inability to grasp reality. Suddenly, a light flickered back into existence, illuminating a sprawling tableau of twisted nightmares. The board was shuddering beneath an unseen force, its plan unfurling like fragile wings of a grotesque moth. The pointer moved violently, skewing toward an unseen quadrant, and the letters pulsated as if they were alive, all at once forming a question that held the weight of ages. "Who will pay?" A shiver trickled down my spine, the answer slashed across my mind with a sharpness that made my breath hitch. At that moment, it was painfully clear I was not alone. They were here, those souls entwined with my fate, pleading with empty, mournful eyes that glimmered from the shadows. The faces of my friends floated closer and closer, transforming in and out of focus, flashes of their last moments, their fright, despair, and the agony they suffered before their lives ceased to help us. They shouted, their voices overlapping into a singular wail that pierced my thoughts, burrowing deep into my consciousness. I staggered back, nearly losing my footing as their anguish enveloped me, wrapping around my throat like a noose. My heart raced, and the realization that this room had transformed into a gateway, a liminal space where the living and the dead collided, consumed my every thought. "Jessica," my voice trembled through the tide of horror, aching to break through the influential grip of despair. But as the shadows shifted, her face emerged once more, contorted by something unspeakable, the sorrow in her eyes replaced by a hollow glint of something darkly beautiful. "Join us," she commanded softly, a voice so sweet it dripped with poison, clawing at the edges of my soul. No. I screamed, the word escaping my lips like a wild beast unleashed. "You're not her." "Oh, but I am," whispered a chorus, merging with her voice, twisting and winding around me like an intoxicating fog. "Don't you see? You need us. We need you." The shadows flickered violently, revealing glimpses of the board's dark history, each letter carved with blooded desperation, each game played a cry for salvation that led to despair. As I cowered beneath the weight of my terror, the pointer began to spin wildly, drawing closer to the edge of the board, then snapping back violently, pointing directly at me. I felt the air change, turning electric, crackling with energy that surged through my veins. Visions invaded my mind, patterns of madness, schemes of betrayal, the torment of those I knew who had interacted with the board before me. They had paid the price, and now it was my turn. Who will pay? The voice of the board echoed again, the letters shimmering back to life, forming new words as though they were being whispered into existence. "Your choice comes due." My heart raced as dread unfurled into panic. I was being drawn closer, the remnants of my friends' souls propelling me towards the board as if they were gathering strength from my fear, whispering secrets of loss and revenge. I forced myself to look away, but as I did, the shadows converged, drowning each plea that flickered in the periphery. "Jessica!" I shouted again, desperation clawing at my throat. "I won't let you take me." But before I could breathe another word, a sharp pain suddenly pierced my chest, hot and electric, as though 1,000 needles were gripping my heart. I gasped, staring down at the board where the glass shard had appeared again, glistening in the flickering light. I felt it shimmering not too far from my heart, its lure undulating, drawing me in. The voices rose higher now, almost deafening, and I was ensnared in their chaos. "Who will pay?" They growled in unison, and in that moment, amid the turmoil, the board quaked violently, sending a tremor that shook the very foundation of reality. In a whirlwind of shadows, a hand shot out from the darkness, cold, clammy, and strangled with despair, and grabbed my wrist. I felt it pull me, drag me toward the board, lifting me off my feet as chaos erupted and darkness opened its jaws wide. The board was glowing now, letters swirling, forming one last message that throbbed ominously, drowning the echoes of tortured voices. "Your soul is wanted." And with that, as I screamed, the darkness swallowed me whole, and the world fractured into a million screaming voices. The darkness was a consuming tide, threatening to wash away everything I had ever known, devouring me into the abyss of despair. I felt the board spell wrapping around my chest, squeezing tighter than any grip that had ever held me through nightmares, my own personal hell unfolding. The edges of my consciousness frayed, like unraveling threads of a cursed tapestry, the vivid colors fading into a gray pallor of impending doom. My heart thundered as I was thrust downward into the chaotic symphony of whispers and screams. Each wail pierced through me like shards of glass, slicing into my psyche. I gasped for breath, choking on the acrid air heavy with regret and haunted echoes. Each syllable from the ghosts around me felt like cold tendrils wrapping around my throat, tightening with each cry that begged to be heard. "You're not meant to be here," a voice rasped, hollow and lacking life, emerging from the deep shadows that twisted at the edges of my vision. It was malevolent, an echo of despair rooted in centuries of suffering. The figure materialized, slightly out of focus, like an old photograph that had bled over time. I could see the contours of its face twisted in a grotesque semblance of human emotion, eyes sunken into its skull, bright like smoldering coals beneath ash. What are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice shaky, barely audible over the cacophony swirling in my mind. "They come to collect," it said, extending a bony hand toward me, fingers elongated and stained with dark, iridescent trails that seemed to ooze from its palm. "You invited them. Now, who among the living shall pay?" My instinct screamed to flee, marking the specter as a grim harbinger of doom. I tore my gaze away, desperately searching through the chaos for any evidence of Jessica, to find a path out of this spiraling nightmare. The faceless wraiths glided through the shadows, looping like a sinister dance, laced with malice, and every smile they wore revealed rows of jagged, blackened teeth as they beckoned me closer. "Reject us, and we will take her in your stead," the lead figure hissed, eyes narrowing to slits, challenge written tautly in its unnaturally stretched lips. Heartbeats raced like the thrum of impending doom surrounding me, filling the void that threatened to swallow all hope. No. You don't understand, I shouted, peering deeper into the veil of nightmares. I won't abandon her, she has already crossed over, the spectre hissed, sinking deeper into the dark pool of despair that surrounded me. You cannot save her. You can only save yourself. The shimmering letters on the board flickered with a malevolent glow. My hand trembled, the glass shard pulsing as if alive, and I was almost drawn to it, the whispers swirling like a tempest. It was intoxicatingly beautiful, the pure mirror of every lost hope trapped within. It seemed to be calling out to me, promising clarity and escape, but with it came the shadow of sacrifice. No, I will not give in. I cried out defiantly, breaking away from the shadow's grasp. The pain in my heart surged anew, a burning ember forcing me to fight back against the parade of souls, each face a reminder of the cost of this dark game. The memories of my friends flooded back, smiles, laughter, moments we had shared now stained with the haunting impression of their loss. I had to cling to that, grip it like a sacred talisman to ward off the encroaching doom. Suddenly, a pulse of energy coursed through the room, tangible and charged. The board began to sway violently, letters colliding into one another and reordering with haste. I felt my mind tethering onto the chaos, hanging on by a thread, and there, among the tumult, a chilling clarity struck me. The impending suggestion of betrayal wormed through my thoughts, each soul yearning for recompense, each lost memory beckoning me deeper into madness. My friends, they can't be gone, I whispered, tears welling beneath a tide of screams that threatened to drown me. They may find their way back. In an outburst of defiance, I lunged toward the board, grasping the shard tightly, ready to take hold of my fate. But just as I prepared to deliver my final plea, the entire chaotic realm shifted, and from the depths of the void, a voice, deeper and richer than the others, surged forth, intimidating and laced with a chilling authority. Then let us play. Indeed, with that, the board erupted into a fury of lights and shadows, the screams cresting into an unholy crescendo as the shards of glass embedded themselves into my palm, each fragment a keystone to a greater horror. The room began to pulsate around me, the walls warping and expanding, bending reality to its will. I was falling, spiraling into the heart of darkness, as fiery crimson light engulfed everything I knew, and before I could grasp what it all meant, the lights merged into a singular explosion of blackness, revealing a Thronian artifact of unimaginable power presided over by an unearthly entity. Choose wisely, for you stand at the edge of oblivion, and time grows short, it boomed, swirling shadows coiling and unraveling with a mind of their own, and as I stared into the abyss, visions of Jessica's face rose from the depths, pulling me in one last time, her eyes wide, pleading, whispering, "Help me!" But before I could respond, I felt the ground beneath me vanish, collapsing into an endless void where the only thing left was the whispering promise of the board. Who will pay? The void swallowed my scream, a chasm of infinite darkness that pressed against my senses with an insidious hunger. I was suspended in an ocean of nothingness, teetering on the precipice of despair. As panic clawed at my throat, I spiraled, losing the distinction between up and down, reality and nightmare. Then, like a cruel twist of fate, the world slammed back into existence, an iron grip of discomfort squeezing my chest as I landed harshly against a cold, hard surface. Gasping for breath, I struggled to comprehend where I was. My surroundings blurred in and out of focus, a shivering haze veiling the truth. Flickering lights danced erratically above me, illuminating the stark walls of a cramped, dust-laden chamber. The air was thick, saturated with the scent of decay, like rotting wood, and damp earth conspired to sink into an eternal twilight. I could hear the hollow echo of my own heartbeat reverberating against the walls, drumming an insistent rhythm of fear through the petrified silence. The whispers returned, a haunting chorus of longing and despair, swirling around the shadows barely clinging to the walls. I felt their gaze, all of them waiting, watching. The scuttling movements at the corners of my vision only amplified my dread, as if something lurked just beyond the reach of my sight, angry and unhinged. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement. A pale, almost ethereal figure emerged, stepping into the faint light. The sight of it froze my blood. It was a child, no older than 8, with sunken cheeks and a disheveled mop of hair that hung limply around her gaunt face. Her eyes, two bottomless voids, glimmered with the weight of 1,000 sorrows. "Help us!" she implored, reaching out with skeletal fingers that seemed too fragile to withstand a breath. "They won't let us go." My heart fractured at the sight, the unholy mix of innocence and anguish carved a deeper pit of dread into my soul. Who are you?" I managed to ask, closing my hand instinctively around the shard still embedded in my palm. "I was taken," she murmured, her voice a mere ghost of sound. "And now I wait." We all wait for someone to set us free, and panic rose within me like a heatwave. I wanted to scream, to lash out against the indescribable horror unfolding before me. The child's body flickered, like a television tuned to static, almost as if she were losing her substance with each passing moment. "You need to leave," she pleaded, her voice fracturing. "Before they come back." "What do you mean?" "Who come back?" Desperation clawed at my throat, but the child only shook her head, terror pooling in her hollow sockets. "They keep the ones who are chosen." The shadows around her twisted, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes, the same malevolent presence I had encountered before. "You have to choose. Make them go away." Her delicate fingers pointed toward the wall, and I followed her gesture, heart pounding as I turned to see grotesque scratches etched into the damp stone, a desperate tally of who had perished, clawing in vain for escape. No, I breathed, horror washing over me as I counted the marks. They were countless, each one a cruel testament to the savagery of an insatiable hunger. Suddenly, a deafening crack reverberated through the chamber, causing me to whirl around as the shadows thickened. A figure emerged, grasped in twilight. It was a wraith, mournful yet insatiable, its sightless gaze locked onto me. "Another one," then, it intoned, voice slithering through the air like a serpent. "Choose wisely. What will you sacrifice?" My heart stuttered, the weight of its presence wrapping around my throat. The child screamed, her voice distorting with anguish as she began to fade into the murky darkness. Don't leave me. Leave her." I shrieked at the wraith, desperation forcing the words from my lips. Take me instead." A monstrous laugh erupted, echoing in the chamber as shadows swirled violently. The wraith's face contorted into something far worse, an amalgamation of pain and glee. "You think a choice is yours to make?" It rasped, ink-black tendrils stretching toward me, weaving through the air. "With a life of their own. You've already set the wheels in motion." With a shattering crash, the walls of the chamber shuddered violently. The whispers crescendoed into a hungry roar, drowning out my thoughts, forcing me back into the swirl of madness. Panic clawed at my insides. "Jessica!" I yelled, panic exploding in my chest. The child had fully vanished, leaving me to grapple with the grim reality of my solitude in this hellscape. The scraping sounds grew louder, punctuated by the thumping of unseen feet racing toward me from the shadows. A sudden chill swam up my spine as the realization crashed down: they weren't coming to take me. They were coming for her. And then I felt a dark, cold hand gripping my ankle. I looked down just in time to see the form of another child frantically reaching for me, her eyes filled with terror and desperation. But this one wasn't fading. She was anchored by darkness, pulling me deeper into despair. "Help me," she begged, and as I reached for her, a thunderous beat of shadows engulfed the chamber, swirling into a vortex, pulling everything toward the maw of an all-consuming darkness. "Choose," the wraith commanded, and in that final moment, I was faced with the deepest, most unfathomable decision: me friends or the innocent. As the world began to collapse around me, everything blurred into an electrifying spiral of confusion, and I felt myself fall into the dark void of the abyss, and then all went black. I came to, gasping for breath as though I'd been submerged beneath icy waters for an eternity. The absolute silence around me felt full of weight, every inch of my body throbbing with the echo of past horrors I could scarcely remember. A coarse surface pressed against my face, stiff and unyielding, a light breeze curling around me like the fingers of something obscured, something watching. With a trembling effort, I pushed myself off the ground and sat up. The chamber had morphed into an open expanse, the oppressive walls replaced by skeletal trees that jutted grotesquely into the sickly twilight. The dim light cast twisted shadows that danced and wobbled, as if mocking my fright. The ground was barren, layered with dead leaves that crunched underfoot, releasing a stench that bit through the air, iron mixed with decay, a reminder of life long extinguished. "Jessica!" I whispered, the name falling from my lips like a mantra. My heart raced, each pulse pulling me back to thoughts of the other children, her fading image filling my mind's eye. If there was a moment before all went dark, it was replaced by another agonizing recollection, screams echoing in my ears, pleading voices drowned out by the static of chaos. A shiver clawed down my spine as I took in the scene, the forest wrapped around me like a vice, ominous and foreboding. This can't be real, I muttered, stepping cautiously over gnarled roots, brow slicked with sweat. This can't be happening, but the silence was deceptive. Shadows darted between the trees, I could sense them, feel their malignant gaze burrowing into my back, rubbing against my skin with insidious intent. I dared not turn to face whatever was lurking. Instead, I cursed the tremor of doubt curling my instinct to flee, heart thudding in my chest as I pressed onward. In that nightmarish fog, I stumbled upon a clearing, a stark contrast to the surrounding woods. Appalling in its serenity, the ground was strewn with porcelain dolls, their glassy eyes glinting sinisterly as they stared up at me. They were arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward, each face frozen in a grotesque expression of terror. A cold dread seeped through me, the undeniable feeling that these were not mere dolls, they were lost souls trapped in a torment beyond understanding. As I approached, I noticed something else, a circle etched into the dirt, faint but indecipherable. An overwhelming urge to touch it gnawed at me, as if it were a thread to something larger. Beneath the surface, I felt the pulse of shadows thrum, like a heartbeat that wasn't my own. My skin prickled as a gust of wind rustled the air, and I swayed on the edge of oblivion, mind racing back to the board. Get out, I whispered to myself, stepping back, but the ground quivered beneath my feet. The dolls began to sway slightly, their heads tilting as if alive, their mouths opening to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Then the echo of laughter sliced through the air, a child's shrill laughter, infecting the silence with a sickening cheer. It cascaded through the trees, chaotic and jubilant, pressing against me like the creeping shadows. I clutched my head, desperate for clarity. "What do you want? What do you want from me?" My voice cracked, filled with anguish. The laughter faded and a heavy silence fell, punctuated by a deep, rasping whisper that brushed my ear like a feather. "You won't be alone much longer." A tremor surged throughout the forest floor, sending a rattling shiver up my spine, and in the distance, silhouettes danced between the trees much like the children I had seen before, except they bore more than just fear. There was a malevolence that radiated from them, a predatory hunger that threatened to consume anything in its path. The forest began to close in around me, the trees shifting like dark sentinels that whispered of past sins and lost souls. Bathed in a flood of anxiety, I turned to run, but before I could make a single step, something yanked me back, fingers like cold iron clenching around my wrist. I twirled around to confront the thing that had caught me, but instead of a creature, I found a reflection, myself, staring back through the hollow eyes of a small doll, its lifeless grin now my own, the laughter echoing faintly in my throat. "Please," I gasped, but the words cut off, choking in the emptiness of my own throat. A surge of panic gripped me as shadows erupted around, animals of darkness tearing their way through the underbrush. "I don't want to be here. Let me go." But as if in terrible response, thousands of murmuring voices told me otherwise, their urgency mounting. And then the dolls began to scream, echoes of Jessica, of the lost children and the things that had taken them. Each cry rang out like a bell tolling doom, sending me spiraling into a terrifying reality where mercy had no place, and each awakening moment brought me closer to a fate worse than death. "Make the choice!" The command echoed, reverberating through me as it plunged into the depths of my mind, tearing apart the boundaries of what was possible. In a fit of despair, I stumbled backward, desperately reaching for the nearest tree to steady myself, but instead found the bark transmuting into writhing flesh, warm and slippery. "Time's up!" The echoing voices had crescendoed, tearing apart my sanity. And then everything went dim once more. I felt myself slipping away, swallowed by an abyss of sound and fury. And as my vision closed in on itself, the last thing I saw were the shadows converging, reaching their hands toward me, their grips tightening as the horrible laughter returned, and I finally understood there was no escape. The darkness had chosen me. The breath of the forest wrapped around me like a shroud, peculiar and damp as I felt my body slip through an unseen threshold. I was pulled deeper into the suffocating darkness, a void that throbbed like a wound, and all sense of direction evaporated. Every instinct screamed for me to flee, yet inertia held me in place as unseen eyes drank in my horror. A cacophony of whispers slithered in and out, my name threading through the unspeakable chorus. "Help us," they begged, soft yet insistent, growing and receding like the tide. It wasn't just the children's voices, they interwove with others, long forgotten and echoing with despair. their calls wrapped around the fabric of my mind, stitching together fear and confusion into something all too corporeal. With a jolt, the sensation of myself ripped back into reality, a bone-deep chill clawing up my spine. I was back in the clearing, surrounded by the horde of porcelain dolls, their blank faces now contorted, each crack in their ceramic skin a window into fractured souls. The etched circle pulsed at my feet, and I realized the ground beneath me was fluid. It churned, sparkling with shadows that coalesced, forming shapes that writhed with limitless malice. From the depths of the circle, an ancient power stirred, and the dolls seemed to catch it, pulling their limbs like marionettes in a sinister dance. With each motion, their laughter morphed into an enraptured frenzy, the air thickening with the weight of their collective anguish and joy, a grotesque mockery of happiness. Desperate, I shut my eyes and pressed my palms to my ears, but it did nothing to dissipate the agony creeping into my core. Suddenly, a sharp, guttural roar echoed through the clearing, silencing the dolls. The laughter died, replaced by a violent rustle among the trees, as if whatever was lurking within their shadows had grown tired of waiting. I hesitantly opened my eyes to find the trees bending unnaturally, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers, reaching toward the sky as though they were feeling something above. A figure emerged beneath the unfurling branches, cloaked in flowing fabric that seemed to blend effortlessly with the shadows around. The air thickened, electrically charged with an intensity that pulsated at my heart. As the figure stepped fully into the clearing, the last light of twilight wavered, surrendering to the creeping dusk. A face, concealed behind a mask of twisted vines and grotesque features, bore witness to my pain, eyes glimmering with the melding of grief and terror. "Why did you summon us?" It rasped, voice a haunting melody that slithered through the knots of fear wrapped around my chest. I couldn't fathom a response, words twisted on my tongue, flaying against the weight of its presence. The figure stepped closer, its form seeming to grow and deflate in rhythm with the pulsing energy of the circle. I backed away instinctively, but something pinned me to the ground, a maleficent force anchoring me to the earth. "Make a choice," it whispered, words seeping like venom into my mind. "Join them forever or face the darkness that seeks you below." A splintering pang shot through my heart at the mention of the children and the price they'd paid. I thought of Jessica's laugh, cloaked in shadow yet always warming my spirit. How had I allowed myself to become part of this? The thought spiraled, constraining my bravery as the choice loomed above me like an omen. "Help us!" echoed the children's voices again, louder this time, a cacophony of longing that soaks into the very marrow of my bones. But I felt the pull of despair creeping closer, shards of my sanity unraveling like fraying rope, squeezing my chest tighter with every breath. Paralyzed, I realized the figure was waiting. It feasted off my hesitation, a living embodiment of my fears. The darkness around me thickened, pressing in a vicious embrace, suffocating my willed run. A voice blared suddenly in my mind, a flash of clarity cutting through the chaos. It was my own, though submerged in tears. Without returning thought, I tore myself from the ground, heart racing as I stumbled backward, only to trip over one of the dolls, which let out a shriek like 1,000 yells ripped apart. But as I looked back, the circle throbbed in warning. The shadows coiled tighter, detaching from the trees, extending their arms toward me, drawn by my very essence. An overwhelming sensation washed over me, pulling glassy memories of the children to the forefront, igniting a fury I hadn't known existed. Then I caught sight of a familiar shape trundling through the darkness, the clump of children's silhouettes, their hands reaching, faces contorted in terror. "Jessica!" I screamed, lungs burning. "No!" But with my cry came the flicker of understanding. Too late, I was tethered here, caught between despair and longing. "Your turn is next," the figure mocked, dreading the pulse of the circle compounded by the cries of my heart echoing through the clearing. And as I felt the shadows close in, my perception spliced through time, splitting the world into bits before darkness consumed me whole. "Choose!" It boomed, a final echoing command that echoed into eternity. The ground beneath quaked violently as my body trembled, suspended in the morbid choice of salvation or surrender. Everything fractured, all choices dissolving into an unforgiving chasm. Then, a cacophonous pop of porcelain erupted to my side, and I turned to see the circle of dolls, now all glaring at mess-hattered pieces, rolling, their mouths opening in an insatiable hunger, and their eyes illuminating the path of a decision I could no longer defer. "How do I choose?" I cried as shadows lunged toward me. And just as I thought I understood the stakes, a whisper ghosted my ear, "Well, take it all," as the darkness swallowed my screams once more, and my fate hung precariously in the balance, shimmered on the edge of oblivion. The air crackled around me, thick with malevolence, each breath tinged with the bitter taste of despair as it unwound around my throat like a noose. The frenzied laughter of the dolls transformed into a chant, rising like a sinister storm. "Choose, choose, choose!" they cried, 100 voices entwined, vibrating through the marrow of my existence. The circle of porcelain figures swelled like a living sea, their eyes gleaming with a veneer of hope draped over an insatiable hunger. I stumbled back, a wild animal desperate to escape a predator. My feet crunched over the remnants of shattered dulce sugary confetti of innocence devoured by darkness. Each crack resonated with the explosive sound of veils torn, layers of reality collapsing under the weight of dread. The figure, now looming closer, seemed to ripple, both familiar and grotesque, as if aspects of all my fears coalesced into one horrifying silhouette. Lightning flickered in the sky, illuminating the clearing, and for a brief moment, I saw their faces pale and hollow. The children peered through the shadows with eyes bursting with desperate pleas. "We're waiting!" they shouted, their voices muddled with fear. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I clawed at the earth, seeking to bury myself alive, to sink beneath the sorrow that threatened to devour me whole. "Don't let it take you." A voice rang out through the folds of darker distant echo I barely recognized as my own. It seemed to slice through the chaos, urging me to remember something vital, something forgotten. In that moment, the mask of the figure rippled. I caught a glimpse of its true face, a tortured visage that flickered between agony and rage. "In this world, choices are the bane of existence," it hissed, words swirling around me, intoxicating and dark. "Join their suffering or suffer alone. The choice is yours to make." I doubled over, feeling nauseous as the ground pulsed beneath me like a heartbeat. The chilling dread coalesced into a shard of clarity. My heart pounded a furious rhythm of rebellion. It wasn't just about choosing for myself, the echoes of those trapped in torment screamed within me. Each haunted glimmering face imprinted upon my mind, Jessica among them, her bright spirit ensnared by the curse that reigned over us all. "She's not just a name." I roared, the words slipping through my lips with desperation. "You want me to choose, but I will not be part of your twisted game." Laughter erupted, echoing through the dark like knives slicing through flesh, shrill and mocking, exploding from the depths of the forest as a memory flickered at the edges of my consciousness. It was the first time I had ever held the Ouija board, Jessica and I giggling under a flurry of stars, the promise of secrets igniting our hearts with an innocent flame. "This is just fun," I reminded her, oblivious to the tide of darkness that swirled when the board first came alive at our fingertips. The memory crushed me, the weight of its innocence now irrevocably tainted. The chant crescendoed around me, voices swelling as I stumbled further back, skirting the edge of the circle. "Leave her alone, I will take whatever you want." I screamed into the void, fists clenched, trembling with adrenaline and rage. The darkness stirred, tendrils of shadow slithering around my ankles, the figure watching with sadistic delight. "Would you forsake all that you love for the naivete of a lost promise?" it crooned, taunting, the voice swirling like a tempest around my mind. With every passing second, the pressure built, the ground beneath me quaking in response to my turmoil. "No." I bellowed, fueled by something deeper than fear, an ember of defiance. The ground heaved again, and I felt the pulse of ancient sorrows beneath my feet, yet I wouldn't be drawn in. But amidst the spiraling shadows came a different vision, a serrated picture of Jessica, her laughter crushed to silence, a marionette cut from the strings. The dolls, now a ravenous legion, began to advance, their mouths unhinging like grotesque jaws, eyes glowing with an insatiable hunger. The chant swirled into a discordant symphony as I realized they were drawing closer, eager to engulf me, to erase my very essence should I falter. "Run!" My heart shrieked, and a surge of primal instinct seized my body, propelling me away from the suffocating eldritch circle. I turned on my heel, feet pounding against the earth as I plunged into the suffocating shadows of the forest. The laughter and cries echoed behind me, but the pull of the circle slackened for one fragile moment. I dashed through the trees, heart racing, branches tearing at my skin. The world blurred around me, the dark curling into an obsidian abyss, and I grasped at the nettled roots and knotted branches like lifelines. But just as echoes of hope birthed a prayer for escape, the forest erupted anew. A chilling sound, a sharp crack, reverberated through my spinier branch, snapping, the chase enfolding me in its ghastly grasp. I dared not look back. Yet a presence shadowed me, swirling with malicious intent. Frost kissed the back of my neck, a sign that something far darker followed as the whispers turned into shrieks, tearing asunder my very soul. A heavy fog rolled through the trees, enveloping the clearing, shrouding everything but the desperate sprint towards safety. Jessica! I cried out again, the name tearing from my throat, but a sudden rush of wind collapsed over me, and I staggered as a deafening roar erupted behind like a beast unleashed. My heart fell into despair, for in that cacophony, I could hear her voice rising among the din, melding with the numberless screams of the captive in that damned void. "Help us! Help!" The lingering echo faded into nothing. And as I dared to glance back, what I saw would chase me for eternity, a wave of shadows advancing with grotesque certainty, the figure rising above them, its mask now bare, all features twisted and familiar. And it grinned, a sharp, predatory smile splitting its face as the darkness surged forth. In that moment, I realized I was no longer just running, I was being hunted. And I had nowhere left to hide. I woke in darkness again, but this time it was not the shadowy forest or the echoing laughter of porcelain dolls. The cold air seeped into my bones as I lay on a hard, flat surface, my senses dulled and my mind hazy. The faint scent of smoke and something sweet lingered in the air, drawing me from the depths of despair. I pushed myself up and blinked, straining to see through the dimness that enveloped me. The walls around me were not walls at all, they were shelves stacked with trinkets, cursed objects, I would realize later. Each item was coated in a thick layer of dust, evidence of years untouched by the living. My heart raced as I took in my surroundings, a dawning realization that this was the basement of my old house, a space I had long forgotten. That realization turned my stomach cold. As I stumbled to my feet, flashes of memory surged through me. Episodical Ouija board, the game gone terribly wrong, the voices pleading for help. It was all connected. I found my voice again, calling out for Jessica, but the silence answered with a chilling echo, mocking my desperation. A creeping sensation crawled through the air, sending shivers down my spine. The darkness pulsed, and the room grew colder, my breath visible as mist. Shadows flitted along the walls, flaring briefly before vanishing back into the void. "They're here," I whispered, knowing, without seeing, that they would come for me again. I felt an unnatural tug at my heart, a tether pulling me toward one of the shelves, a compulsion that felt familiar yet foreboding. I hesitated, but the pull grew stronger, surer, even inviting an irresistible call from the darkness. Before I could think twice, I reached out and grasped an old, ornate box made of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols I couldn't quite comprehend. As I lifted it, the shadows within the basement seemed to stir, thickening and swirling as though reacting to my action. The box felt heavy in my hand, as if it were a gateway between the realms of the living and the lost. I could hear them then, the whispers threaded into a tapestry of chilling unity. They weren't merely voices, but fragmented souls, their agony condensed into every syllable. "Let us out," they hissed, a whisper like the rustling of dead leaves against wood, pooling around me like a fog. "We need you." Clenching my jaw, I fought to resist the lure of their desperate pleas. I was not their savior, I had only brought destruction to those I cared for most. But I could feel the fraying threads of my sanity beginning to unravel, memories entwined with their anguish, the voices of lost friends resolute, binding me to their fate. "I can't help you, I can't help you, I didn't mean to." The panic clawed at my throat. No, I would not play their game again, I would not be consumed by the darkness that already feasted on my soul. I turned away from the box just as it vibrated violently in my grasp, the symbols along its surface glowing with a malevolent energy. Then, I felt ita gripping pressure around my heart, a crushing force anchoring me to that fear-laden past. Shadows twirled like sinister dancers, and as they coalesced, figures emerged, skeletal and malicious. I could see their eyes, hollow yet incandescent with rage and sorrow, visions of my friends, twisted and forlorn. Their mouths moved, forming silent words, but their wails echoed through the chamber, crashing against my resolve like waves against a shore. "You need to choose." The malevolent energy in the air pulsed, and as it did, I recognized the faces among them. Jessica's was the most prominent, a tortured reflection of regret and loss painted on her features. "You wanted help?" They need a vessel, a sacrifice. The truth struck me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't just meant to choose someone to save, the decision I faced was far darker. To release them, to help their souls ascend, I would need to offer my own. A familiar dread gripped me, the memory of the Ouija board clawing back at the forefront of my consciousness, the curse, the binding pact, the unholy bond stitched together with the threads of my life. No, I refused to, but before I could finish the thought, the twisted figures lunged at me, their collective energy crashing through the room and enveloping me in a whirlwind of despair. In that moment of desperation, I clutched the dark box to my chest, and in my unwillingness to let go, the shadows around me shifted, growing restless, a storm brewed within their depths, rising to envelop me. A sudden flash of light burst forth from the box as I threw it open, revealing a portal of shimmering blackness. An escape. No, I gasped, their faces flickering before me, haunting me. I won't abandon you, the shadows recoiled, as if my words sparked a fevered rage. Join us! They cried in agony, but their rebuke fell silent against the violence of the dark portal's call. With clarity surging through my veins, I grasped my choice. If I must choose, then I will choose what I love the most, I cried. With everything I had left, I wrenched my heart from the clutches of despair and flung it into the portal. The room exploded with blinding light, shadows shattering into fragments as screams of fury and grief echoed around me, merging into one final, spine-chilling wail that rang throughout the darkness. The force consumed me entirely, swallowing my voice, my thoughts, and my very essence as I spiraled into the void. Then, silenced. I opened my eyes to a world clothed in vivid colors, blues and greens swimming before me like whispers across a dream. As I sat, bewildered and breathless, I understood what I had sacrificed. Freedom washed over me like a gentle tide, yet a lingering weight pressed against my heart. Through the clarity, the realization suffocated me. The voices had ceased, but their absence left something darker behind, an emptiness, an echo of souls that were not truly free. The board had not merely bound them, it had left behind the curse it had been forged with. I freed you, I realized, heart hammering. And yet, I could still feel the binding energy beneath it, a tether that now lay within me, a constant reminder that I had become something I never wanted to be, a vessel just as they were. In a twist of fate, I felt warmth against my back, a flicker of familiarity. I turned, and there, framed in the soft light of dawn, was Jessica, her spectral silhouette flickering like an old film. Thank you, she whispered, a sad smile curling her lips, but just as quickly as she appeared, the shadows returned, shrouding her in darkness, the hollow whisper emerging again. Who will pay? I backed away slowly, panic rising anew. Because the truth was left unspoken, echoing painfully in my throat. Though I had sacrificed a piece of myself for freedom, the darkness still lingered, hungry, searching, ready. And as I stood there, alone but not so, I could feel the creeping chill sliding up my spine like an icy hand, a nightmarish promise that even in salvation, not everything is put to rest, and the darkness is not so easily escaped. The last flicker of my sanity burned bright as a chill wind whispered my name again, Jessica. Because I hadn't just freed them, I had opened the door wide for something worse, and the shadows were waiting on the other side.